In the radiant sunset of San Diego, the gentle waves lapped against the shore, like soft melodies narrating the tales of time. Hector Sousa, a famous millionaire from Mexico, strolled leisurely on the deck of the ferry. Accompanying him was his daughter, Margarita, who had just turned 18. They had just spent a long day touring Coronado Island, a place known not only for its picturesque beauty but also for the everyday stories of the humble people who lived there. Yet for Margarita, none of this mattered on her birthday. Leaning against the railing of the ferry, the young girl let out a sigh, her eyes filled with disappointment. "Why did you choose such a poor place to celebrate my birthday?" Margarita grumbled, her tone clearly filled with reproach. She had envisioned a grand party, an evening lit up by the dazzling lights of an upscale restaurant, not a tedious day in a neighborhood she deemed unworthy. Hector remained silent, only offering a faint smile at his daughter's complaint. In his seasoned eyes, Coronado was more than just an ordinary island. To Hector, its narrow streets and aging houses brought back memories of his own past. "Margarita, there are places that may not seem glamorous but hold countless valuable lessons," Hector said, his voice reflective. He didn't tell Margarita that he himself had grown up in a poor neighborhood in Mexico City, where every day was a struggle to survive. As the son of a chef and a tailor, Hector had started working at the age of 14 to support his family. He had walked for hours to get to work, skipped breakfast to save money, and endured scoldings from bosses just to keep his job. From those tough years, Hector learned the value of hard work, compassion, and humility, qualities that had brought him to where he was today. As the ferry neared the dock, Margarita glanced at her father and noticed his contemplative expression. At times, she couldn't understand why he spent so much time caring about such trivial things. But she said nothing more, turning away to gaze at the distant shore. Then, something unexpected happened. Just as the ferry docked and Hector stepped onto the pier, he suddenly realized his wallet was missing. It wasn't just any wallet, it contained cash, important documents, and the credit cards essential for their trip. Panicking, Hector checked all his jacket and pants pockets, but his efforts were in vain. "I've lost my wallet," he told Margarita, his voice tinged with regret. The young girl immediately frowned, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "You were definitely robbed. I told you, places like this aren't safe at all," Margarita said, her tone full of doubt. She scanned the crowd of tourists around them, as if searching for a suspicious figure. But Hector simply shook his head and calmly replied, "I'm not sure it was stolen. Perhaps I left it somewhere." "Left it?" Margarita scoffed bitterly. "So you think someone will just find it and return it? Look at the people around us, Dad. If someone had picked it up, they would have returned it by now." Hector didn't argue. He knew that expecting kindness in a world filled with needs and temptations wasn't easy. Yet deep down, he held on to hope. He had encountered kind people before, and he believed that goodness, no matter how small, still existed somewhere. Amid the growing tension, Hector let out a quiet sigh. He could sense his daughter's frustration, but more than that, he was worried about the problems losing his wallet might cause. Even so, he tried to remain calm, reminding himself that sometimes, in the most challenging situations, the most extraordinary miracles occur. And indeed, something unexpected awaited Hector in a place he never could have anticipated. That evening, back at the hotel, Hector sat quietly in the lounge, turning his phone in his hands, but no calls came. Margarita, already upset about her ruined birthday plans, couldn't hold back her frustration any longer. "You always trust people so naively," she said, her tone sharp. "Look at where that's gotten you. Now you've not only lost your wallet, but also ruined my birthday." Hector didn't scold his daughter. Instead, he smiled faintly, his eyes calm as they gazed out the window. After a moment of silence, he began to share a story Margarita had never heard in full before. "When I was your age, I lived in a poor neighborhood in Mexico City. Every morning, I walked nearly 2 hours to get to my part-time job because my family couldn't afford bus fare," he said, his voice reflective but steady. "I started working at 14 to help my parents make ends meet. Some mornings, I didn't even have money for breakfast, and there were days I had to skip lunch altogether." Margarita listened, but said nothing. Her expression began to change. The story her father was telling was far removed from the life of comfort and privilege she had always known. But you know, Hector continued, those difficult years taught me something important. Never underestimate the power of kindness. There were people who helped me back then, even though they didn't have much more than I did. They gave me faith that good people still exist in this world. Margarita stayed quiet. She had never imagined that her father, the strong, successful man she had always admired, had lived through such struggles. However, she remained skeptical. "But you can't expect strangers to return your wallet," she muttered. Hector simply smiled and didn't argue further. The next morning, as Margarita reluctantly prepared for another uneventful day, Hector's phone suddenly rang. He answered quickly, and a young voice spoke from the other end. "Sir, I found your wallet," the boy said. "You can come to this address to get it." Hector felt a wave of relief wash over him. However, Margarita was immediately skeptical. "Dad, don't you see this could be a trap? We can't trust an anonymous phone call like that," she said, her voice filled with worry. "I trust my instincts, Margarita," Hector replied calmly, "and I believe this boy doesn't have bad intentions." Still, Margarita insisted they bring a bodyguard for safety. After some preparation, the three left the hotel and headed to the address the boy had provided. The road to the address led them to a neighborhood far removed from the wealth and luxury they were used to. It was a modest area with old, peeling houses and muddy streets from the previous night's rain. Margarita, accustomed to the opulence of upscale neighborhoods, felt deeply uneasy. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered, clutching her phone tightly as her eyes darted nervously around. Hector, however, felt an unexpected sense of peace. The neighborhood reminded him of the one he had grown up in, where every crack in the pavement held a story, where neighbors shared what little they had, and where dreams often felt out of reach, but never completely impossible. Finally, they arrived at a small house with a faded fence. A thin boy appeared from the doorway, holding Hector's wallet in his small, calloused hands. He stepped out, his eyes a mix of shyness and hope. "I just wanted to return this to you," the boy said softly. "I don't need anything, just $2 to buy a birthday cupcake for my sister." The boy's words stopped Margarita in her tracks. She couldn't believe that after everything, the boy's only request was for $2, a sum so insignificant compared to the wealth her father possessed. "What's your name?" Hector asked warmly. "My name is Paul," the boy replied. "I live nearby with my mom and my sister. Tomorrow is my sister's birthday, but I don't have anything to give her." Paul's story touched Hector deeply. Margarita, too, began to feel a pang of guilt for her earlier assumptions. Overcome with emotion, she opened her father's wallet and pulled out 3 $100 bills, handing them to Paul. "Take this, Paul. Use it to buy your sister a birthday cake, some clothes for your family, and whatever else you need," she said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. Paul stared at the money in disbelief, his small hands trembling as he accepted it. Thank you so much," he stammered. But Hector didn't stop there. He invited Paul and his family to the hotel the next day, offering to host a proper birthday celebration for Paul's sister, Cindy. The next day, Paul, Cindy, and their mother, Elizabeth, arrived at the hotel, dressed in new clothes they had just bought. It was their first time stepping into such a luxurious space. Margarita had arranged a small garden party with a cake, balloons, and even gifts for Cindy. Cindy, an 8-year-old with sparkling eyes, was overjoyed. "This is the most beautiful party I've ever seen," she exclaimed, her voice brimming with excitement. Margarita watched the scene unfold in silence. For the first time, she understood the joy her father found in helping others. It wasn't about the money. It was about restoring dignity and hope to those who needed it most. After the party, Hector pulled Elizabeth aside. "You've raised remarkable children," he said. "Paul's honesty and integrity are rare qualities, especially given your circumstances." Elizabeth smiled through tears. "Thank you, sir. We've faced many hardships, but I've always taught my children to do what's right." Hector nodded thoughtfully and turned to the hotel manager. "We're still hiring for a housekeeping manager, aren't we?" he asked. "Yes," the manager replied. "And from what I've seen, Elizabeth would be perfect for the role." Elizabeth gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Me? I don't know if I'm qualified." "You have the honesty and determination this job requires," Hector assured her. Say yes. With a mix of disbelief and gratitude, Elizabeth accepted the offer. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of stability and hope for her family's future. As they returned to the hotel suite, Margarita turned to her father with newfound admiration. Dad, I think I finally understand, she said. I was wrong to think kindness doesn't matter. What you did today, it changed an entire family's life. Hector smiled, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. And now, you've learned the lesson I've always wanted to teach you. Kindness, no matter how small, can create the biggest changes. Their trip, though far from the extravagant celebration Margarita had envisioned, left them with memories far more meaningful. And for Paul, Cindy, and Elizabeth, it marked the beginning of a new chapter filled with hope and opportunity. A chapter made possible by the kindness of strangers and the belief that even the smallest acts of goodness can ripple into something much greater. As the first light of a new day stretched across the San Diego sky, Margarita woke up feeling lighter and more at peace than she had in a long time. The events of the previous day lingered in her mind, but they no longer carried the weight of frustration or anger. Instead, they brought a sense of clarity and understanding. She looked at her father, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in hand, and her eyes filled with admiration. I understand now, Dad, Margarita said, her voice soft but firm. Wealth isn't about how much we own, it's about how we use it to make the world a better place. Hector smiled and nodded slowly. I've always known that one day you would see it for yourself, he replied. Sometimes we need experiences to realize that the most meaningful things in life don't come from what we keep, but from what we're willing to give. Elsewhere in the city, Paul, Cindy, and Elizabeth were beginning a new chapter in their lives. That morning, Paul and Cindy dressed in their brand new clothes and carefully packed their new notebooks into their backpacks. For the first time, they were heading to school with excitement and hope, feelings they hadn't known for a long time. Meanwhile, Elizabeth boarded a bus to her new job at the 5-star hotel, her heart brimming with gratitude. She felt not only lucky but also renewed in her belief that hard work and kindness are always rewarded. For Margarita, this trip didn't just change the way she saw the world, it transformed who she was. In the past, she had valued extravagance, lavish parties, expensive trips, and the glamour of luxury. But now she realized that true happiness didn't come from superficial indulgences. It came from seeing the smile on Cindy's face, the gratitude in Paul's eyes, and the joy Elizabeth felt when she said she finally had a chance to change her life. Before leaving the hotel, Margarita turned back to look at the garden where the party had taken place the day before. She could still see children like Cindy and Paul laughing and playing in that colorful, joyful space. A warmth spread through her chest as she realized that in that moment, she had truly understood the meaning of happiness. It wasn't about what she could keep for herself, but about what she could give to others. Margarita made a decision that morning. From that day forward, she would continue to spread the goodness her father had shown her. She wanted to be not only a daughter he could be proud of, but also someone who could make a positive difference in the lives of others. I'll continue on this path, Dad, she said, her eyes shining with determination. I won't let these lessons fade into just memories. Hector smiled proudly. He knew that this trip, which had begun with disagreements, had ended with something far more valuable. It wasn't just a lesson for Margarita, but also a reminder to himself that even the smallest acts of kindness could change an entire life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Life Stories 365. This is where we share meaningful stories that inspire kindness and offer valuable life lessons. Let's work together to spread these positive values so that each new day is filled with hope and love. See you in the next video.